misconceptions that we might have about diet, exercise, and weight maintenance.
There's a lot of them,
There are a lot of them. And so
which I've learned.
yes. And so let's talk first off here so that we get some terms, because as I like to toss out the meme out there, you keep using that word, but I don't think you know what it means. And so we use the word calorie a lot. And so what is a calorie? And that's kind of the first key step that we have to have here. And so calorie is a unit of heat. It's a unit of
Right.
energy. And it's a unit of energy that is based off of the specific heat of water that is about 4.1868 kilojoules of energy for every dietary calorie that we consume. And now the question is, what do you mean by kilojoule?
Yeah, that is a good question. I was just about to ask that.
And so kilojoule is simply the unit of energy that we use in science that is a measure of work that's being done.
So
And
the chemistry definition, isn't it heating up 1 joule of water? How much energy it takes to heat up 1 joule of water?
it's not 1 joule of water, it's 1 gram of water. And
Oh,
so yeah, and so now we have two different calories that we're looking at.
right.
And so we have calorie in the sense of chemistry class. And once again, I
Yes.
know that's what will make some people cringe whenever we hear the word chemistry class.
Yeah.
There are calories in chemistry class, and that's the amount of heat that's required to raise 1 gram of water 1 Celsius.
Okay.
And so when we look at water, one of the things that we have to remember is that water has a density of 1, which means that for every volume unit,
Mm-hmm.
there is a single mass unit to it. And
Okay.
so a lot of times we talk about water, we don't talk about in terms of grams. We should talk about in terms of liters, milliliters, ounces.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about that, we're talking about the fluid volume.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing with water is that water's density is 1. And so that means that for every 1 volume unit, we can use a mass unit.
Okay.
And so when we talk about the chemistry side of stuff, we're talking about in terms of grams. However, because we don't like using big numbers unless we're dealing with money, we like to change the units a little bit in science. And so what we'll do is we'll change that calorie from the chemistry class to calorie for the dietary unit.
Okay.
And so the dietary unit calorie is the same as 1,000 of the chemistry unit calorie. And so that is what's referred to as a kcal.
That okay. Yeah. I kind of vaguely remember this from watching. The only information I've ever gotten for calories is from that what was that guy who did the McDonald's diet for a month? Right.
So the one of the problems with that mockumentary, and I'm gonna call it a mockumentary because even though everybody thinks of it as a documentary, it's not really. It was not set up in such a way as to actually truly document what was happening, particularly if we look at it in terms of diet and exercise and the scientific basis for doing diet and exercise.
Okay.
And whenever we do science as it relates to diet and exercise, we want to do is we want to, and this goes into the scientific method, we want
Yeah.
to we want to make sure that we're only able to analyze the variables that we can control.
Right.
The dependent and independent variables, the testable and measurable responses. So the testable
Yes.
variables are those variables that we manipulate, the
Mm-hmm.
independent variables, whereas the measurable variables are the variables that we're going to record, such as weight, cholesterol levels, lipid levels, heart rates,
Right.
those factors. And those are the dependent variables within the scientific method.
Right.
The problem with that cluster of information is that part of the problem is that it's based off of anecdotes. It happened to me, so it must happen to everybody.
Yeah. That's
But
a
the
big one.
other problem is that he changed way too much of his lifestyle in order to attribute all of the issues that he had at the end of 1 month to just changing diet.
Right. I
And
didn't
so,
even think
so
about that.
and so this is where myself looking at it in terms of a health exercise scientist,
Mm-hmm.
I have to look at it in terms of what would be a normal population response. And so everything that we look at in terms of normal population response goes into the normal curve. And where would 95% of the population be within the normal curve? And so when we talk about normal responses as relates to any of the dietary stuff,
Right.
what we're talking about is we're talking about where within 95% of the population are you?
Exactly.
And so normal is 95%.
Right. I was thinking about that because I know people in my personal life who have a huge psychological block when it comes to this type of stuff, just for multiple reasons, but a huge one is they try a diet for a little bit, it works at first, it stops, and then they stop because they're like, "Oh yeah, it doesn't work anymore. It's a fluke." So
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to kind of ask about that stuff, but I cut myself off in the notes because I'm like, yeah, that's kind of going a little off track because I know you're not a psychology major,
Well, we
obviously,
could
but you know psychology.
yeah, we could
But
talk we'll talk about that a little bit in a little bit here.
okay,
And once again, we're getting a whole bunch of clips that we can start smashing together.
I know I'm giving you exclusive
Yeah.
content to
Yep.
put on the oops behind the paywall.
Yeah. So to get us back onto track here, and it's gonna be a lot of me listening and doing a lot of editing here, but that's cool. So when we look at the calorie issue, one of the things we have to look at here is that we have to change our evaluation of calorie when we start talking about diets and
Mm-hmm.
dietary calorie, because we're not going to use the big number, we're going to use the small number. And
Okay.
so what we use is we'll use what's referred to as a kcal. That's
Mm-hmm.
1,000 of the chemistry class calories as a
Right.
single unit within the dietary calorie. And so that's the equivalent of how much heat is necessary to raise 1 kilogram of water, 1 degree
Oh,
centigrade.
okay.
And so once again, you got to think back to anatomically speaking, how much fluid do we have in our body? And that's about 60, between 55 and 60% of body mass, depending upon gender and fat mass, is going to
Mm-hmm.
be water. And so if I'm going to elevate my body temperature by 1 degree,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to have so many calories of heat being produced.
Right.
The way in which we get that heat is through chemical reactions known as combustion reactions.
Right.
And so combustion reactions is where we take uh, a molecule, react it with oxygen,
Mm-hmm.
and have carbon dioxide and water come out as the end product of the chemical reactions. In
Right.
our body, those molecules are going to be the carbohydrates, metabolites of fatty acids, and metabolites of amino acids.
Okay.
And so what we'll do is we'll take the carbohydrates, we'll take the lipids, the parts of the fatty acids, and parts of amino acids, and turn them into what's referred as hydrocarbons. Those are
Okay.
just chains of carbons and hydrogens stuck together. There may be
Right.
some oxygens in there as well. And we react that with oxygen within the cells of our body. In those reactions, we're going to get the energy molecule ATP, adenosine
Yes.
triphosphate, back so that the
Mm-hmm.
cells can do what the cells need to do. But the cells are going to produce as the waste, as the end product of that chemical reaction, carbon dioxide and water.
Oh.
When we do that, we get some, because it goes into the laws of thermodynamics, we get incomplete transfer of energy within the molecule. And so this goes into why you can't have like perpetual motion,
Right.
because every time we have some sort of reaction, there's energy that's being lost.
Yes.
And for our body, the energy lost is lost in the form of heat.
Right. Exactly.
And so when I'm exercising, my body's going to start to heat up. My body's going to start to heat up because I'm starting to increase the rate of metabolism, the rate at which metabolic processes are taking place, which is going to produce more carbon dioxide and more water, but it's also going to have heat as the byproduct, because every time we have a chemical reaction, a small bit of heat gets shed from the reaction because energy gets shed. Energy gets lost into the tissues.
So is that what people mean when they say we're burning a calorie, is we're
That's
exuding heat?
that's what people are referencing when they say we're burning calories, is that
Okay.
we're exuding heat. And so the better way to talk about this question, we'll get to this issue here in a few more minutes in terms of more detail, is that we're expending calories,
Okay.
because we're utilizing the energy within the molecules to give our cells the energy molecule the cells can use. And as a byproduct, we're producing this heat. And so
Right.
we're not actually using the calories,
Mhm.
but what we're doing is we're producing those calories. We're producing heat.
Oh, okay, so it's actually producing a calorie in terms of measuring the heat that we're exuding.
Exactly. And it
Oh,
will,
that's weird.
yep.
That's
And
an
so
odd way to think about it.
yeah, it's kind of it's we're basically we're kind of flipping the whole kind of viewpoint on its head. We're
Yes.
kind of, I guess the best way to think about it is we're doing like a mirror flip
Yes.
in terms of it, in terms of how we're looking at it. Now that same kind of energy thing, if we go to the gym and we use any of the gym equipment,
Mhm.
and it tells us that we're using so much energy, we're producing so many calories, we're expending so many calories of energy, the gym equipment is not specifically measuring that. What it's doing is it's typically either using how much wattage is being used by the machine,
Mhm.
or it's going to utilize what's referred to as a metabolic equivalent, a MET, MET, it's an abbreviation.
Okay.
And so the metabolic equivalent is how much change in metabolic rate is occurring due to the exercise. And
That makes more
so
sense.
us sitting here just having a conversation right now, we're at a 1
Right.
because we're not very metabolically active.
No.
If we start walking around while we're having this conversation, we're
Mhm.
going to be above 1. We're not going to be
Right.
super above 1, but we'll be above 1. If instead of just walking around having this conversation, we're going to do this while we're running on the treadmill,
Mhm.
that's going to take us up above that, a little bit above 1. So it once again depends upon how fast the tread is moving and what angle the tread is at.
Right.
But that's going to change the metabolic equivalent of the exercise. And so when we're looking at what's taking place in the gym setup
Mhm.
of energy utilization, it's going to be based off of not what is happening inside of our body, but what's happening with the machine.